libertylovefest.org. That's libertylovefest.org.
Good evening. My name is Tony Jones, and you are tuned in to The Coalition, where we discuss all sides of local, regional, and national news, politics, and current events online at coalitionradio.us. My old pals are here. Chris, good evening.
Good evening, Tony.
The PO taxpayer is here, extra PO'd.
Tony, I'm happy to be alive.
PO, did you have any Scooby-Doo style adventures this week?
Ruh-roh. I spent some quality time with the fine folks again in upstate New York.
In the ghetto.
Or, as a wise man once said, one of the philosophers that it's affected my life, up from the ground came a bubbling crude. I explored upstate New York again, and I will tell you that if we think Rhode Island's in tough shape economically, New York, the giant sucking sound you hear is what's left of the economy disappearing. I spend a lot of time on the road, Tony, and a lot of time, you see those travel commercials where the dude is, he's in Hong Kong and he's in the sleeper seat on Air Nissan or whatever, and then he's flying to London, and then after that he's got a meeting in LA, and then he meets his wife down in Mexico for 2 weeks. My life is just like that, except I'm going from Lawrence, Massachusetts to CF to Philly to Rochester. So, and usually it involves a Trailways or a Greyhound bus at some point.
You told me earlier this week that you were going from Detroit to Philadelphia, and I rubbed in a little. I said, well, I'm going from East Greenwich to West Warwick.
Right. and there's an economic statement in there somewhere.
Yes, there is.
All right, but
to Rhode Island, there's a temporal equivalent.
But no, Tony.
West Toledo, Woonsocket.
I woke up this morning and I said, wow, of all the life choices I made this year and in the last 53 years of my existence, moving to Little Rhodey.
Wait a minute, you're that old?
I'm that old.
Wow.
And,
wow, you are old enough to be my father. I thought we were closer in age.
Young Skywalker, you are my son. Well, I mean, we have the same force, right?
Did you happen to be a mailman in the early 80s? That would explain a lot.
We are part of the same force. We have the same taste in music. Okay.
Not so much, but
wieners are a major part of our life.
No comment.
And to you and I, when we say all the way, it has a different connotation from most guys. Okay?
And both of us, unlike our other two in-studio guests, who happily made it up 5 flights of stairs, you and I, we started at noontime to get up 5 flights of stairs today.
I saw a bivouac down on the second floor. I was wondering what that was all about.
There's a little campfire there when we head down again.
Where are the heart paddles? That's what I want to know. Yes, the world of radio is not unlike the world of entertainment or restaurant, the business.
It is really, really glamorous.
Right, and
tell you.
There's an eclectic set of standards that are applied to the workplace environment in all of those above. And the last week or so, first of all, I want to thank our guest and partner in crime here, Dave Fisher, after a slight absence, coming back tonight and jumping in and filling in because due to some wardrobe malfunctions, we are unable to, other than do a rope climb, get up here to the bunker on the 5th floor.
Like I mentioned last week, and like I mentioned last night on the Tony Jones Show, you really know when you're out of shape. When you need a break, you get winded going down the stairs. I stopped at the 3rd floor.
Well, like the old parable of the camel whose rider asked him, would you rather climb uphill or go downhill? And he said, I'd rather walk on flat ground.
Right.
Well, instead of certain types of tossing, we're going to have host tossing later on to get downstairs. But it's been an adventurous week out in the world. Lots of things have happened here in Rhode Island and abroad, in Connecticut and New York. What was it this week? In major news, we were treated to the great haircut scandal, where a woman in daycare had her child's hair cut and has now invoked attorneys and invoked the Rhode Island legal system. That's all that matters in Rhode Island, right? Anything else going on right now?
Um,
Pension crisis.
Oh, people are still ticked off about calamari.
Okay, all right.
People will always be ticked off about calamari.
But this week,
There was this fascinating quiz that apparently was done on the participants of the Leadership Rhode Island panel, which includes several of our mayoral candidates.
do tell.
And quite a few of the gubernatorial candidates.
And
That's actually what I meant.
if you go to
misspoke.
my personal Facebook, I eloquently referred to that as something I can't say over the air, but it involves people standing in a circle. Once again, that just
and not firing squad.
Awful article in the Providence Journal today. A huge circle, and you fill in the blank.
Right.
There was some silly, aptitude or personality test that everyone in this particular
Next week on the
course
Providence
took.
Journal,
Yeah.
we're going to have all of the candidates for governor fill out a Mad Libs. That's what journalism in Rhode Island has come down to.
I want to know their astrology sign,
Well, Chris,
and then I want to do a tarot reading for
could
each
get
of them.
Myrna Lamb in on that.
Yeah.
Well, no. One of
Well, the best part, and I was sorry you didn't see this. I think there were only 4 candidates for governor involved in this,
right.
and the 2 that were not in this particular setting were asked. Gina Raimondo and Todd Giroux were asked to take the test and report back. And Ms. Raimondo's campaign declined.
Because of the high level that she's trying to articulate in a campaign format?
I think she was busy making meatloaf.
Oh, okay. The pot roast panderer.
Which, by the way, the mainstream media has latched on to P.O. Taxpayer in this breaking story of pot roast.
Well, I'm doing whatever I can to ruin lives, create agony, sarcasm, cynicism, and chaos. And I want Gina to know that I'm here for her. Any missteps, I'm there to take the picture. But so what were some of the questions? What?
They didn't reveal the questions, actually, but I think we can go to the Gallup website and take a similar test ourselves. But the outcome of the test were, what are the 5 dimensions that are most prominent in your personality? And it had to do with, whether you're a collaborator or a...
It was basically like an employer's self-evaluation for an employee. If you had to pick one strength that you think is your, and they were,
were they self-evaluations?
I believe that they were, they gave you a
yeah.
list of these, 10 personality traits, and you had to pick the one that you thought was most applicable
that doesn't
to
really
yourself.
count. If you have to actually take a test and you don't know what the outcome is going to be, that makes a little more sense.
Right.
I'm going to have to research this later.
Well, ultimately, I guess the Providence Journal asked the question, and I guess Mr. Fitzpatrick, do you want a governor whose main strength is being analytical? How about a learner? Or perhaps a futuristic candidate? Now, some of these candidates, I would like to be a futuristic candidate.
Well,
because I wish
Clay Pell is a futuristic candidate,
Right.
in case you wondered about that.
Well, my idea of him being a futuristic candidate is leaving the damn state and thinking about running in the future. All right. I guess Ken Block self-analyzes himself and navel-gazes himself as being analytical. Okay, I'll go with that because Ken Block and Todd Giroux are still the only candidates who have elicited any sort of, I don't know, program. Go figure. Fung, he says supposedly that he's a learner. Great, on-the-job training.
Well, we want people who do learn. That's not a bad thing, but it just seems as if all of these traits are going to be things that you want a leader to have in conglomerate. You don't want somebody who's just one of these things. So I'm not really sure what the point of this test is.
To fill up pages in the Providence Journal.
I mean, maybe they could have taken the Myers-Briggs test.
Tony's
or
metaphor is apt.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's
Which Disney princess are you on BuzzFeed?
I just want you guys to know that I personally took the Princess Bride test today, and I got Fezziwig, Andre the Giant. So there is some legitimacy to these tests.
And you have a posse. So.
Right. I do.
And I took the Princess Disney test, and I'm Ariel.
I took the
totally
which classic rock band are you, and I wound up as the Rolling Stones.
That's all right.
Which is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
I'll take that,
I ended up as Spinal Tap.
You wound up as
band.
the fake band.
Exactly. My life is a mockumentary.
This goes to 11.
Yeah. So listen, sleep tight, Rhode Island. There's nothing to worry about. I often encourage people to find out new ways to burn this village so that someday we can save it. You don't even have to try at this point. I can't imagine any one of the major candidates. And I hasten to exempt my friend Todd Giroux from that because I think he's a major league guy. But if you look at the what the media has deigned to be those who matter, the Block, the Raimondi, and Fung. We got to throw Tavares in there too. He's all right. Even though he's done a bang up job with Providence, picture any of them as governor right now, and if you expect any different results from what you've got here, then you're insane. There's nothing going to happen. There's nothing going to change. These folks are all, with the exception of Mr. Block, these people are all. The old line that I use is these people are not trying to help people get lives; they're trying to get one themselves. They're not trying to actually grow the state. It's all about creating a future for themselves and their coat hangers, carry-ons, and hangers-ons. It's pathetic.
Is it too late for the four of us to run?
Yeah,
because I could use a life.
Well, in the ride over here, Dave and I were chatting today, and we talk about, folks, if you ever have heard of something called the Peter Principle, that's where someone rises to the level of their own incompetence. And we have in this state a guy named Charlie Fogarty, who is the living, breathing example of that.
Department of Administration?
No, that's Department of Labor and Training.
Okay, yep.
So here's a guy who has actually never held a job in the dreaded private sector. And yet he's been hired to run. And after, being lieutenant governor, which qualifies you for nothing, other than the ability to fog up a mirror, here's a guy who now is going to run the Department of Labor and Training. There are two functions to the Department of Labor and Training. People associate it with helping the employment situation. That's really not true. That person's job is to administer the efficient department, if you will, of the unemployment compensation fund, and B, to accurately report the unemployment rate. Is it fair to say he's been an abject failure on every single level, on everything he's done?
Sure. And I would add that there's a failure in reaching out to employees who may or may not feel like they've been treated fairly by their employer. I believe that's a function of the Department of Labor and Training as well.
Mm-hmm.
Abuses continue to go on in the workplace. Everybody knows that.
Right.
Places have failing elevators that are not EDA compliant for their, their employees. Yeah. No handicap access. Certainly some issue could be taken up with that.
Yeah.
And just, like you were saying about the radio and restaurant industry, there's that overwhelming attitude from many employers that's basically, well, if you don't like it, you can leave.
Yeah. Don't want the door hitting the
and people feel like that they get trapped in a situation, somebody who's, you get forced into this idea that, just be thankful that you have a job.
Right. And that is one of the functions of the Rhode Island malaise. It's almost good enough, so we'll just go along to get along. And, what are some other features of the Rhode Island malaise?
I think part of the problem with the Rhode Island, the quote Rhode Island malaise is there's this idea that, and this is true of all politics. I think we see it a little bit clearer in Rhode Island because we're such a small state, and we see what happens in Westerly and what happens in Woonsocket and Providence. But part of the problem with politics to me is when somebody comes up with a new idea or something that may be a departure from the status quo or the way that we've always done things, you immediately have 100 people that'll stand up and tell you why that'll never work.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is a huge part of this Rhode Island malaise. So we never get any creative ideas or new approaches to solving problems here in the state or even in our localities, because as soon as you say something like, oh, the state should make an investment in this, people go, oh, that'll never work because the voters will never, they'll never vote for that bond issue. They'll never want to borrow that money to get that done. Even if it's something, that's going to benefit the state, maybe, improving our public transit or repairing our roads or making sure that our beaches don't wash away into
Right.
into the ocean.
And they're answering the question for us rather than letting it go further in many cases.
Right, and I think the state itself, and certainly many of the localities, many of the municipalities, are in a position where it's time to just throw everything against the wall and see what sticks. And you find what works, and then you carve away what doesn't work, and you move on, and you try something else. Because clearly, the business as usual is murdering this state.
Riddle me this. One of the themes